Have you ever paused before sending a text and asked yourself, which part of me is trying to be heard through this message? Because sometimes a simple, good morning, isn't just a greeting. It's a whisper from a heart that's afraid of being forgotten. It's not just about him. It's about you, about the part of you that's still waiting to be chosen, to be seen, to matter in someone else's day. And maybe that message isn't really about connection. Maybe it's a quiet cry for validation. Louise Hay once said, "Every thought we think is creating our future, and every word we write reveals something deeper, not just what we want from someone else, but what we believe about ourselves." Have you noticed that? That when you send a message from fear, it feels different in your body, tight, anxious, almost like you're holding your breath, waiting for proof that you matter. There's a huge difference between reaching out because you feel full and reaching out because you feel empty. One is a gift, the other is a lifeline. And no one teaches us that. No one tells you that the good morning you send can either be a gentle invitation into your peace or a silent negotiation for attention. The truth is, a woman who constantly needs to be remembered is often a woman still trying to prove she's worthy of not being forgotten. And that's not her fault. That's a pattern born from years of giving too much and receiving too little, from always being the one who cares more, from being emotionally present for people who disappeared the moment you needed them to stay. Marianne Williamson said, "Love is what we were born with. Fear is what we learned here." And somewhere along the way, we learned to confuse love with performance, to believe that if we say the right thing, at the right time, in the right tone, maybe we'll finally be loved back. But what if the most powerful message you could ever send didn't depend on his reply? What if it was rooted in the energy behind it, in the quiet confidence of someone who no longer needs to be remembered because she already remembers who she is? We're about to go deeper into that. But before we do, take a moment. Put your hand on your heart. Feel what's still asking to be heard, because that's where your real message begins. There's a kind of message that doesn't come from joy, presence, or affection, but from absence, from the hollow space left by a silence that lingers too long. You've sent one like that, haven't you? Not because you were full of love, but because you felt yourself slipping into the background. And maybe if he heard from you first, maybe then, you wouldn't disappear. That good morning is different. It doesn't land softly. It carries an invisible weight, a hidden hope that maybe, just maybe, today he'll respond with the tenderness you've been craving. It's not a message. It's a rescue mission. Not for him. For you. For the part of you that still believes that being remembered means being valued. But here's the quiet truth. Most people won't say out loud. When you reach out from emptiness, what you often receive is more emptiness. Not because you're not worthy. Not because you're too much. But because the energy behind your words is filled with fear. And fear doesn't magnetize love. It repels it. Not in punishment, but in reflection. The universe reflects back what you feel inside. This kind of texting pattern isn't just about technology. It's about emotional survival. About hoping someone else can anchor your day, so you don't have to face the weight of anchoring yourself. It's about mornings that begin with anxiety, not sunlight. With a screen, not a breath. With longing, not grounding. And the most tender part of this story? You're not alone. So many women wake up with that ache, the ache of wondering if today they'll finally feel chosen. And still, the message gets typed. And still, the heart waits. But what if there was a different way to begin the day? What if you didn't need his response to feel alive? We'll go deeper into that in a moment. There's a kind of message that isn't really for him. It's for the version of you that's quietly unraveling inside. The one who feels like she's fading, inch by inch, every time the silence stretches too long. You don't just want to be remembered by him. You need to be remembered by yourself. Because somewhere along the way, his attention became your mirror. His replies became your reflection. And without them, you start to wonder if you still exist in the places that once felt like home. This kind of longing wears disguises. It dresses itself in tenderness, in warmth, in just checking in, or hope you slept well. But underneath, there's an ache, a fear of becoming invisible, a fear that if you don't say something, you'll disappear from his world and from your own sense of being. Louise Hay's words cut through this illusion gently but powerfully. I now choose to approve of myself. Not wait for someone else to approve, not beg for space in someone else's life, but to approve, to see yourself, claim yourself, and validate your own presence, even when no one else is watching. It's not easy, especially when you've spent years offering love that wasn't returned, being loyal to those who were inconsistent, and shrinking yourself to be more palatable. more pleasing, more lovable. That's not just a pattern. That's survival. That's the voice of a woman who's done everything she can to hold on to connection, even when it meant letting go of herself. But here's the truth you were never told. Being remembered by him will never replace what it means to be remembered by you. Because when your sense of value depends on someone else's memory, you're always one unread message away from feeling unworthy again. There's a softness that comes when you no longer plead for space, when you realize that presence isn't something you earn, it's something you are. And the moment you choose to approve of yourself, deeply and unapologetically, something shifts. You stop chasing. You start radiating, not for him, but for the woman inside you who finally feels seen. And that changes everything. There's something magnetic about a woman who no longer writes from fear, but from fullness. A message sent from that place doesn't try to convince, to prove, or to chase. It simply exists. Soft, natural, unforced. And that energy is unmistakable. When a woman is rooted in her own essence, her words carry a different weight, not heavy with expectation, but grounded in presence. There's no urgency in her tone, no subtle grip behind her sentences. Instead, there's an ease, a grace, a quiet strength that says, I am here, not because I need to be remembered, but because I enjoy remembering myself. Feminine energy doesn't manipulate. It doesn't strategize how to get a response. It flows, it invites, it offers, without collapsing. And when that kind of energy shows up in a message, it creates something rare, true connection. Not the kind based on emotional transactions or silent demands, but one that honors both people as whole, sovereign beings. You can feel the difference, can't you? A message written from a wound feels like a question mark. Will you love me today? But a message from an integrated heart feels like a period. Calm, certain, open, and complete. This isn't about withholding affection or pretending to be indifferent. It's about offering warmth without losing yourself in the process. It's about knowing that your words carry power, not because of how they're received, but because of where they come from inside you. When your energy is clean, untainted by desperation, untouched by old stories of abandonment, your presence speaks louder than any sentence you could ever write. And that is the beauty of feminine communication. It's not in the performance, it's in the frequency. It's not what you say, it's how you feel while you say it. And that, more than anything else, is what makes you unforgettable. There's a quiet moment each morning that holds more power than we realize. The moment before you send that first message. For some women, it's a conscious choice, a gentle reaching out. But for many others, it becomes a ritual of survival, a ritual of emotional dependency masked as routine. You wake up, heart already slightly racing, and before your feet touch the floor, your thoughts rush to him, to whether he's thinking of you, to whether he'll remember you. And in that instant, the message becomes a thread, not of connection, but of control. If he responds, the day feels lighter. If he doesn't, the whole body feels heavier. And that isn't love. That's a wound rehearsing its own script again. This pattern doesn't make you needy. It makes you human. Because when affection has been scarce and presence unreliable, your nervous system starts seeking predictability in small things, like a message, like a reply, like a few typed words that say, "You're still here. I still matter." But over time, the message becomes less about greeting and more about grasping, less about sharing and more about securing a sense of being wanted. That's the emotional trap. When your well-being becomes tied to someone else's thumbs typing back. When your light depends on a screen lighting up. When the day begins with a question, did he respond? Instead of a truth, I'm still here. I'm still whole. Louise Hay teaches us that awareness is the first step to healing. And when you start to observe this dynamic without judgment, just gentle curiosity, something begins to shift. You begin to notice the pattern, not from shame, but from wisdom. You begin to reclaim your mornings, not as a countdown to his reply, but as a return to your own rhythm. Because your morning deserves to begin with presence, not with waiting, with breath, not with tension, and with your own voice whispering, I belong to myself first. There's a sacredness in the first moments of the day, before the world asks anything of you, before the phone pulls you into someone else's orbit, before you remember who didn't call, who didn't stay, who didn't choose you the way you had hoped to be chosen. Those first breaths, they hold power, and Louise Hay, in her quiet wisdom, knew this deeply. The way you begin the day sets the tone for everything, she said, and she meant it. Because if your first thought is, will he answer? Your energy becomes tethered to his. If your first gesture is to reach outward, before turning inward, your sense of value becomes something you seek, not something you embody. And when the first thing you offer is a message, instead of a moment with yourself, the entire day can slip into a loop of needing, proving, waiting. But imagine this, standing in front of the mirror, just as the light begins to shift, and saying to yourself what you've been aching to hear from someone else. Good morning, my love. I'm here. I see you. I choose you today. That changes the air. That shifts the atmosphere around your body. Because when you speak to yourself with reverence, the world begins to respond in kind. Not always immediately, not always in the form you expect, but undeniably, energetically. And when you do decide to send a message to someone else, it comes from overflow, not from lack. It becomes an expression, not a request. It becomes an offering, not a test. There's no panic behind your words. No fear stitched into your punctuation. Just presence. Just intention. Just the quiet, knowing that love is most powerful when it's not trying to be earned. This is the essence of emotional wholeness, not needing a reply to validate your voice, but knowing that even in silence, you are enough. And when that becomes your new tone, everything around you starts to harmonize. There's something subtle and often overlooked about the way men form emotional bonds. It's not always through long conversations or grand declarations. More often, it's through how they feel in your presence. Not what you say, but how they feel about themselves when they're around you. And this matters deeply when we talk about texting, especially in the early hours of the day. Men, consciously or not, emotionally anchor themselves to moments that offer a sense of peace, lightness, or positive stimulation. It's not about being impressive or overly affectionate. It's about being real, grounded, and emotionally clear. The energy behind your words becomes the invisible message they respond to, not necessarily the content. So when a man receives a message that feels like pressure, like a test, like a veiled plea for reassurance, something in him quietly pulls away, not because he doesn't care, but because emotional charge can feel like weight. And most men, especially those unaccustomed to emotional depth, instinctively avoid what feels heavy. But when a message arrives with levity, a gentle surprise, a soft laugh, a calm presence, it creates something memorable. Not because you tried to be memorable, but because you allowed space for connection, for spontaneity, for curiosity. That's where emotional anchoring happens, in the places where there's room to breathe. This doesn't mean dimming your light or silencing your truth. It means understanding the dance of polarity, the way grounded feminine energy awakens the secure masculine, the way calm creates attraction, not chaos, and the way your inner peace becomes the very thing he feels drawn back to. Louise Hay taught that we teach others how to treat us by what we choose to believe about ourselves. When you send messages from a belief in your own worth, your words carry an energetic dignity. They don't chase, they don't cling, they invite. And the man who's ready recognizes that invitation. There's a tenderness in those 4 words. Hope you slept well. They seem harmless, gentle, even thoughtful. But for many women, they carry something unspoken, something deeper. Beneath the politeness, there's often a quiet yearning, a soft ache, a question that never quite makes it to the surface. Do you still care? Sometimes, what we write isn't what we feel. We choose the safe version, the acceptable version, the one that won't scare him, won't expose too much, won't make us look too emotional. So instead of saying, I miss you, we say, hope you had a restful night. Instead of confessing the silence feels loud, we wrap it in pleasant sentences. But deep down, we're hoping he'll read between the lines, and that's where the danger lies. When we over-communicate on the surface, but under-express what really matters, we end up saying a lot, without ever saying the truth. And over time, those words become empty habits. Not because they lack meaning, but because we've edited the emotion out of them. We've hidden what we really feel behind a mask of casual care. But your heart doesn't want casual. It wants real. It wants presence. It wants honesty. Not always loud, but always true. And when you silence that part of yourself, even in small ways, you begin to feel invisible. Not because he isn't listening, but because you've stopped speaking your inner language. Louise Hay reminds us, I am willing to release the need to be approved by others. And part of that release is giving yourself permission to be emotionally authentic, to risk being seen even when it feels vulnerable, to say what you mean, not to get a certain reaction, but to honor your own voice. Sometimes, Silence says more than scripted messages. Sometimes, the most powerful thing you can do is pause and ask yourself, what do I truly want to say? Not what will sound right, not what will make him stay, but what will bring you closer to yourself. There's a quiet but powerful transformation that happens when you begin to validate yourself before you speak, before you type, before you reach. The energy of your message shifts, not just in tone, but in essence. It's no longer a signal flare, asking to be saved. It becomes a gentle ripple, radiating from a place of self-recognition. Neediness isn't about how often you write. It's about why you write. When the core motivation is to fill a void, to be seen because you can't bear your own reflection, the energy comes through as urgency. Even in the sweetest words, there's a subtle plea. Please make me feel okay. And that's the energy people feel, even if they don't have the words to name it. But magnetism, true feminine magnetism, begins when you stop outsourcing your emotional safety. When you write not from the hope of being chosen, but from the knowing that you are already whole. That shift doesn't make your messages colder. It makes them clearer. It doesn't make you distant. It makes you deeply present. A woman who validates herself speaks with calm power. Her words don't rush. They don't bend to be liked. They move like water, soft, but unstoppable. She's not trying to prove anything. She's simply expressing. And that expression carries a frequency that calls others into alignment, not through pressure, but through presence. This doesn't mean suppressing your desire to connect. It means connecting from a different place. Not from the ache to be remembered, but from the joy of being in your own company. That's what makes the difference between a message that gets ignored and a message that lingers in the heart. Because when your energy says, I don't need you to complete me, it allows the other to come closer, not out of guilt or obligation, but out of genuine resonance. And that kind of connection is unforgettable. When a woman is no longer texting to be chosen, but from a place of choosing herself first, everything changes. Her words soften, not out of need, but out of wholeness. Her tone lightens, not because she's pretending not to care, but because she truly feels safe within. And that shift is felt. The most magnetic messages are often the simplest ones. They carry no weight, no unspoken demand, no coded sadness. They sound like breath, like peace, like someone who has met herself in the mirror that morning and decided once again to love what she sees. Good morning. I woke up smiling today, not sure if it was the dream or the peace I felt sleeping. That message isn't seeking a reaction. It's sharing a moment, a glimpse into your own world. It says, I'm okay in my own skin. And that is what calls others in, not because you asked to be seen, but because your light makes it impossible not to notice you. Other times, your message may carry curiosity, playfulness, or presence. I heard a song this morning that reminded me of nothing and everything all at once. Or maybe just, the sunlight came in through the window today like it was trying to kiss the floor. Thought of you. And then, sometimes, you say nothing at all. Not out of bitterness, not out of fear, but because your silence feels full. Because you don't need to fill the space. Because peace has become louder than your longing. This is emotional maturity. This is feminine radiance. Not silence as punishment, but silence as sanctuary. Not words as bait, but words as blessing. When you communicate from that place, your messages stop chasing and start echoing, quietly, deeply, within the hearts they're meant to reach. There comes a moment, quiet, almost imperceptible, when you stop waiting for his answer and start listening to your own. When the message you long to send is no longer about being seen, but about celebrating the woman you've become in your own presence. That shift isn't loud. It doesn't demand attention, but it radiates. It emanates from every word, every breath, every silence you now choose with intention. Louise once said, I am a magnet for divine love. And divine love doesn't plead to be received. It doesn't contort itself into perfect timing or perform for affection. It simply is. It lives in truth. It flows in alignment. It whispers, I trust that who is meant to meet me will meet me where I already am. And Marianne Williamson reminds us, love begins when you stop negotiating your presence, when you stop shrinking your voice into digestible lines, when you stop measuring your value by the speed of someone else's reply, because your words carry vibration. And when that vibration comes from a place of healing, of rootedness, of emotional sovereignty, you don't need to convince anyone of your worth. You don't wait to be remembered. You become unforgettable by the way you inhabit your own being. Let this be your remembrance. You are the message. You are the morning. You are the warmth someone wakes up hoping to feel. And the most powerful good morning you'll ever send might not be typed at all. It might be the way your presence lingers in someone's mind, the way your silence feels full, the way your energy says, "I'm already home within myself." And if these words touch something in you today, if they reminded you of the woman you're becoming, I invite you to stay close to this space. Subscribe so that your journey is never walked alone, and let your next step be guided by a voice that sees you, not in pieces, but in your sacred wholeness. You'll find another video waiting for you here on the screen, a continuation of this path, created to hold your heart with the same softness. Click and let it meet you where you are, because healing doesn't happen in one morning, but every morning you get to choose again. And this could be the one where you remember you are not waiting to be loved. You are already love, embodied.